Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. For today's video, it's another Patreon sponsored review, this time of Altered Carbon Season 1. Now, normally for my Patreon sponsored reviews, I just do one-off episodes or movies for my reviews just because I don't always have time to do an entire season-long review. But for this reviewer, I had already seen all of Altered Carbon, and when it comes to Altered Carbon, it's hard to sort of like divorce and pick out a single episode of the show. So I figured since I'd already seen it, I was just going to give my whole thoughts on Altered Carbon Season 1, and I may even get in touch upon my thoughts on Altered Carbon Season 2 in this video because I've also seen that as well. And before I get into my thoughts on Altered Carbon Season 1, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe because you don't want to miss any of my wonderful, wonderful content. Yeah, no, I didn't even believe that either. Yeah, well, hit subscribe anyways. Anyways, so Altered Carbon Season 1. This was a show when it was coming out, when I first heard about it, I was super excited for it. I am a huge fan of the Blade Runner, cyberpunk kind of aesthetic and look. It's not always my favorite, but pretty much anytime I see that sort of look and aesthetic, I'm always in love with it. So I'm surprised that it doesn't always like register as something that I put in like my top tier settings, but I always enjoy it. Like Blade Runner 2049, one of my favorite movies of all time. The original Blade Runner is great too, but I'm one of those people, those crazy people that actually thinks Blade Runner 2049 is better than the original. I know, don't hate me. I will say, when it comes to the world building and aesthetic on display in Altered Carbon, I don't think there is another TV show out right now that surpasses it. Star Trek, I think, is the only franchise that is like really elevated the bar when it comes to a cinematic feel and look of a TV show. But barring that, Altered Carbon, just aesthetically, looks fantastic. Now, the aesthetic is very much kind of borrowing directly from Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. It doesn't really do anything new with that look, like something like I don't know, Cyberpunk 2077 is doing, that video game that I'm really excited for, or even Tron kind of had its own sort of cyberpunk. Tron and Tron Legacy had its own cyberpunk look and feel to it. While this is kind of directly stealing from Blade Runner, it does so very, 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 very beautifully. I think every shot, every look, every feel of the city feels lived in, feels gritty. I mean, one of the major problems when you have a sort of smaller budget show, TV show, is that you get like something that looks cool, but it looks too clean, looks too empty. I mean, this is a problem that I saw in the show The Expanse for its first couple seasons. The first season or two of The Expanse, it was this big expansive world. It was supposed to be like, and a lot of things were supposed to be like living in the slums of space stations, but everything looked really clean because it was clearly they like, built the sets and then we're just like, we don't have a lot of time, just build the sets and do it and put it in there. So I really appreciate that Altered Carbon just feels lived in. This world feels so fleshed out. The idea that we live in a society where people can just re-sleeve themselves. They're essentially immortal, and their bodies, they're not like tied to their bodies in any way, shape, or form that we are today. So that people can just place themselves into a new body, and ideas of race, class, well, class is actually a different thing, but race and gender and identity, stuff like that, is less relevant. And so I liked that the show kind of played that out in a lot of ways. Like, people were living in debauchery. It's a lot of hedonism. One of the things I am disappointed when it comes to the world building, though, here, is that there's a lot of, and this goes to like what I like out of shows. I mean, I'm a Star Trek fan. I like things that talk about politics, social class, race, gender, things like that. And I think that this concept of switching bodies inherently sort of asks those questions, like tied in that concept, ideas of race and gender are just baked into the cake. And the show kind of skirts around it. Like, for example, our lead character, Kovac, is an Asian man who has to live in a white body throughout the series. And I think there's some moments that play some talk into that, like talking about how he doesn't like this body and sort of feels lost from his culture. But this season doesn't really touch upon that in ways that I thought that could have been asked for. Now, one could even say like this is a society that's moved beyond all that stuff because it doesn't really matter anymore. But I feel like there's an opportunity to discuss those things that I think just doesn't get to play out. And it does get played out, kind of, future spoilers, in Season 2 of Altered Carbon, where we get to see that Kovac in that season still is not in his sort of body, his identity as an Asian man, but still like goes and reconnects with like his Asian roots in that season. And it's still not perfect, but I think Season 1 kind of missed that opportunity quite clearly here, that I'm glad that they at least kind of picked up on a little bit in Season 2, but still not as well as I think they could have. The one thing I think they do nail, and this starts to get into the plot of the show, is ideas of class. I really love the instigating plot of this show where Kovac is brought back to life. He was someone who fought against the re-sleeving idea in a sort of civil war years ago, and they lost, but he's brought back into his body to sort of investigate this murder of a really upper-class guy, and because he's upper-class, he doesn't have to ever worry about like not having enough money to re-sleeve himself, and even though he was killed, he is brought back because he has a backup saved of his body. And so this idea, like even in a society where ideas of class, ideas of gender and race have kind of gone out the window in a lot of ways, class still plays a role, and how much money you have still plays a role in how you exist in this society. Like even beyond ideas of identity, ideas of class sort of surpass that, and ideas of race, gender are kind of inherently tied up in class struggles, because kind of gender and class stuff is made up and is only there to support a class-based system. And so I like that the show at least honed in on that as its sort of linchpin issue that it wanted to talk about. But as the show went on, and this is a problem with Netflix shows in general, and I think the pacing of Altered Carbon loses steam. And this is a problem that I have with most Netflix shows, is that most Netflix shows try and say like, oh, we need to hit like 10 episodes, 13 episodes, or just they like pre-plan it out, and then they kind of have to fill that void. And I saw this most notably with the Marvel shows on Netflix, whereas like I think those Marvel shows suffered by being a little bit too long, and they could have been like 4 or 5 episodes shorter and been better for it. And I think that's the same thing here with Altered Carbon. There's a distinct drag in the plot of this season throughout the middle part of it, where it's just like, let's just go explore the world and see like this cool fight arena area, or this other like sex area dungeon, whatever that goes on in this world, and isn't really progressing the plot forward in any way, because I feel like the world building's interesting, they wanted to explore that, and they also needed to fill time. I feel sad that we get lost in the weeds of the world building here and not directly sort of naturally taking us through a lot of the world through the plot. I'm going to come back to how the plot revolves in a second, but another thing that I want to talk about are 2 actors that I really want to focus on in this review are Joel Kinnaman and I forget the actor's name, but the actor who plays Poe in the show. Those, I think, are the 2 strongest characters throughout this entire season. Joel Kinnaman is an actor who he's one of those like kind of bland action guys that kind of got slotted into a bunch of different roles. Like, yeah, we need a lead character who can just like be the, you know, straight white dude who's just gonna be blandly leading the show going forward. You know, we saw that mainly in RoboCop and Suicide Squad. Again, 2 very bland whatever roles. And I like in this show that Joel Kinnaman gets a little bit more chance to shine as a character. Now, Kovac doesn't necessarily have the greatest range as a character, but Joel Kinnaman does at least get a chance to bring a lot more nuance to a role than he got a chance to give in RoboCop and Suicide Squad, where he was basically like, I'm sad because my life sucks. And while he does have that sadness here, you get to see that he has a little bit more of a chip on his shoulder. He's a little bit more, got something he's fighting for, and a little bit more revolutionary in this as we sort of flesh out his character. And so I do enjoy that he's got a lot of more time to shine, and Joel Kinnaman does a great job throughout this season playing that role. However, the actor that really, really, really shines throughout this entire season is Poe. I'm blanking on the actor's name, apologies to him, but he does a fantastic job as Poe. Poe is a character he's a holographic version of Edgar Allan Poe, and he brings the hilarity to the show. He's very funny, very off-kilter, especially like getting to play like this I'm Edgar Allan Poe hologram and sort of the servant character. And again, this gets developed even further in season 2 of Altered Carbon. In fact, I think in Altered Carbon season 2, his arc in that season is honestly the only arc that like really feels worthwhile in the end of that season. It's very similar in this season as well, in that he gets the emotional core of this season, where we get to see him trying to save this little girl's life who, you know, she's become trapped in sort of a hologram version of the world, and you see him really trying to connect with her, and you really feel that weight on him when he ultimately, spoilers, when he ultimately fails at that at the end of the season, or he succeeds but she dies anyways for sort of a greater cause. And you really feel how that affects him and hurts him, and again, and that goes into season 2. Best character on the show, and really just makes it worthwhile. The final note that I want to end on Altered Carbon Season 1, the thing that really kind of frustrates me with the show is, and this happens in Season 2, the resolution to the season is just kind of boring, lackluster, and doesn't really complete the themes that the show was really wanting to talk about. Like, this season of Altered Carbon really felt like it was starting off trying to be an indictment of class and discussing ideas of class within a cyberpunk world. And not to say it can't deviate from that, but the way the season ends, it becomes this whole thing where, like, oh, he learns his sister's still alive and that she may have killed his lover, and it becomes like this melodramatic family drama that's like a little bit weirdly incesty because his sister kind of has feelings for him. It gets kind of convoluted and weird, and again, like I said, doesn't really complete the plot. Like, I could see what the writers were going for. His sister was a revolutionary as well because she turns on him, but she's doing it because she wants to keep him alive and trying to keep in his best interest. So there is a kernel of idea playing out the themes of like how class politics manipulate people against each other. But ultimately, it just becomes family melodrama, blah, 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 I don't really care. And so I think that that's really the biggest flaw in this season. And again, small spoilers for season 2 of Altered Carbon. The same thing happens in season 2 of Altered Carbon, where it sort of sets up this idea of how your life has led you, like your memories. Do memories define you? Do memories define you as a person? And that's all fantastic. I think that's a great theme for season 2 to explore, is what do our memories make us? But then it becomes like this weird plot about like, oh yeah, aliens are doing weird stuff. And it just feels like so divorced from the main themes and plot and character arcs going on in the show that I'm sort of like, it just sort of wraps up silly. It just feels silly and off topic and kind of leaves me like bad taste in my mouth at the end of the season. Like, oh, well, okay. That kind of ends stupidly. That's sort of the best way I can answer it. It just feels kind of like, you didn't really complete anything that you set up. You sort of set yourself up to hit the ball and just whiffed it right at the end. So I think that that's sort of my biggest disappointment with the show, that it has all this great world building, it has all these great themes and ideas, but doesn't fully pay them off in a really strong way. I think the only themes that really get paid off and character arcs that get paid off are in Poe's storyline, and the rest are sort of like peters out towards the end. But that's my thoughts on Altered Carbon Season 1 and a little hint of my thoughts on Season 2 of Altered Carbon. But what did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of Altered Carbon. Also, if you want to have your own reviews sponsored on this channel, don't forget to give to my Patreon page. It also helps me out a lot right now during this current craziness going on with the economy. I lost my full-time job, so any support over on my Patreon is really, really greatly appreciated, especially right now. But regardless of if you subscribe or give to my Patreon, I'm just glad that you stopped by as always, and I hope that you live long and prosper. Thank you all of you for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons, including my amazing commander level and above patrons: Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen, Eli Berg-Moss, Sela Roman, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Stefan Schuhart, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Ish the Mad, Randy Thompson, Mouse Pounder, Wellington Marcus, Lorena Mesa, Alexander Miller, Mari Neckar, Gavin Robinson, Michael Beam, Aaron Brown, Munir Amlani, Maggie Evans, Maeve, Wendizzle Bizzle, Dante St. James, Wayne Twitchell, Patrick Shannon, Din Hagney, Mystic the Monarchete, Bree Beecher, and Polly Mina. All of your support means so much to me right now, so thank you to all of you. Live long and prosper.